Hey class, welcome to Chapter 12, Section 1, Improving Transportation. One thing you're going to find in Chapter 12 are no presidents, no laws, no bills, nothing like that. No Republican, Democrat, Whigs, none of it. We're looking at things that improved life, new inventions in transportation, in communication, in agriculture, and industry, a wide variety of things that make this chapter a real unique one. And the first thing we want to look at today are just some changes in transportation, the way things had been done, and then some of the changes that are going to take place. Three distinct, unique roads at this point. The first is the Great Wagon Road. Notice the Great Wagon Road. The Great Wagon Road traveled north-south alongside the western slope of the Appalachian Mountains. This route was used by thousands of travelers wanting to travel from Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, all the way down to South Carolina. Here is an artist's drawing of this Great Wagon Road. It's very useful in moving folks. A second key trail is the Wilderness Road. Notice it mentions just a little bit right here. I'm going to talk about it a bit more on the next slide, but it's going to branch off of the Great Wagon Road and cut into Tennessee. It's going to allow people to go a little bit more westward into this new territory, into these new states that were coming about. And the third and final road I want to mention to you is the National Road. The National Road starts here in Baltimore, Maryland, moves all the way west to St. Louis, Missouri. The National Road is the only one of these roads funded by the national government, which is where it gets its name. It began in 1811, finishes up many decades later. It was a big task to make these roads. Notice the amount of work going on in making these roads. You would level out the ground, remove trees, go through rocks, crush the rock, and then smooth it out, making it okay for a stagecoach or a wagon or a horse to travel on it. It was difficult to move that way, but it really is going to help connect different parts of the country, whether it's east-west or it is north-south. These three roads, Great Wagon, Wilderness, and National Road, play a big part in early connecting of the areas. And I want to talk about the Wilderness Road. The Wilderness Road is created by Daniel Boone. Daniel Boone is one of many men, but he really led the way on this journey. Here he is pictured bringing some folks on the road. Obviously pictured here, a real trailblazer. And what's unique about Daniel Boone and the Wilderness Road is that he took advantage of what we call the Cumberland Gap. The Cumberland Gap. The Cumberland Gap is a natural passageway through the mountains. If you notice here on these artist drawings, you have mountain, and then over here, mountain and mountain. But through here is a natural made, a God-made area through the mountains that was not mountainous. It was a gap called the Cumberland Gap. And it allowed folks to travel through the mountains into Tennessee. And Daniel Boone helped to lead that way, and that was helpful. So early travel by roads, we have some early roads that helped to move people around. Another way that people moved around on the water. Different types of water vessels were used at this point in history. Three boats that were used early on were the flatboat, the keel boat, and the canoe. And these boats were great for moving goods, moving products, moving people, even cattle up, or they could go downstream very easily. It was easy to go with the flow of water. However, what happened when you wanted to go back upstream? There was no engine anywhere. It was all done with these poles that would help them stay away from shallow water. And these boats could go in very shallow water. They're very flat on the bottom. All three of them are. It did go up and down rivers fine, but what happens when you had to go back up the river? They'd go downstream 5 miles, 10 miles, 20 miles, but to go back upstream, either with just poking yourself with these poles in the dirt or by using oars, is incredibly difficult. So a couple things would happen. One, sometimes if you would tie horses or oxen to the side, they would tie ropes to the boat, and the oxen would pull the boat back upstream. This was really taxing on your animals, not really the best way to do it. At times, they'd make these boats so cheaply and poorly that they would travel downstream and then just leave the boat there. It'd be used for scraps. This wasn't the most economical way, but it was all we had before power. And so when the steamboat created by a man named Robert Fulton introduces the steam engine, and this have a huge impact on sailing. The steamboat could now easily go back upstream. It was phenomenal. It opened up many opportunities to settlers to travel west, stay in communication with friends who lived in the east, plus transport goods to and from the east to the west. It really revolutionized things. It was a huge asset and could do things that, of course, the keelboat, flatboat, canoe were unable to do. Another challenge that people faced when it came to water travel was, how can we travel on water where no water exists? So they began to create this thing called the canal. The canal. Let's define canal first of all. A canal is a shallow, man-made water highway that connects two bodies of water. And the first canal created was the Erie Canal. The Erie Canal is located in New York State. If you can see, it goes from here all the way to Lake Erie in the Great Lakes. What was great about the Erie Canal is, here's the Hudson River, and the Hudson River goes and ends up, of course, in New York City, which goes out to the Atlantic Ocean. So now somebody could, hypothetically, sail from France to New York City, hop on the Hudson River, and now go all the way down the Erie Canal into Lake Erie, and now you're into all of the Great Lakes. It allowed for great transportation, moving of goods. And this one opened up in 1825. And again, opened up the Atlantic Ocean, the whole world, to the middle of America. And the canals helped to reduce freight rates, open new areas for settlement and transporting of goods, and helped America to expand its activities. If you notice here in the bottom right, I want to point out, notice that animals still being used to pull the boats up and down. Typically, there's not a whole lot of flow in a canal. Not a lot of water moving one way or the other. But a lot of canals were made, but important. It had to connect two bodies of water, two rivers, two lakes, two somethings, and just kind of created their own river. And a lot of canals still in use today throughout America. Well, we have a lot of new things for water, whether it's a steam engine or the new canal. But what about roads? And what about on land travel? A man named John Stevens has a branch that's really going to help out. Here we see John Stevens here, located in the top left-hand corner. And John Stevens creates the first American locomotive on a railroad track in 1825. John Stevens is based out of Hoboken, New Jersey, and this is revolutionary, right? It's going to begin to allow people to travel on land. And you didn't need to have water like you did for a canal or for a river travel in order to move. And this system worked out okay, and he kind of got the ball rolling, but it was further expanded by a man named Peter Cooper. Here you can see Peter Cooper's invention in the bottom right, a little more developed, using the steam engine, a little more power, helped to move a little bit more, a little more efficiently, and Actually, by 1831, we have the first scheduled rail service. So you could take a train from point A to point B. Took you from Charleston, South Carolina to Hamburg, South Carolina. At that point is the largest stretch in the world in 1831. And this is going to just change the way everything is done in America for the next 50 years of how we travel and how we transport goods from one point to the next. As you can imagine, while the first regularly scheduled trip is located in the South isn't very industrial, so most of these tracks are going to be laid in the North. If you look at this map here on the bottom right, you can see just the impact here that travel had in the North. They actually said that by 1840, railroads had grown by 500% in the North, while in the South it had only doubled, which would be 200%. Of all of the mileage of train tracks in America, 2/3 of them were up here in the North. Even though it's a smaller area, they had 2/3 compared to 1/3 here in the South. That's because, of course, the North was much more factory driven and really helped to unite the economy of this western area with the Northeast. That's going to help them out when it comes time to the Civil War. I also want to show you this little chart here and just the impact that these different resources, the different roads, canals had on travel and movement of goods. Notice here that roads, you had 2 miles per hour by wagon or 6 to 8 miles per hour by stagecoach. To ship something, 12 cents per ton per mile. A canal, well, about 1.5 to 5 miles. Look how much cheaper it is per ton per mile. It's a fraction of the cost of the 12 cents. This is 4.5 cents. A steamboat, notice the speed change, 20 miles per hour. Notice how cheap it was, less than a penny per ton per mile. The clipper ship, we haven't talked about that yet, but we will. Pretty fast, depending on the weather, but look how expensive, $10 per ton. And the railroad, about 20 miles per hour. So on land, this is your way to go. On water, the steamboat's your way to go. And the railroad also pretty cheap. Nothing though as cheap as the steamboat. And if we had to compare quickly the advantages and disadvantages of the canal to the railroad was typically cheaper and faster than the canal. Also, trains were not affected by the weather. Sometimes canals would freeze over in the winter. And then, of course, also railroad could go into areas where there was no water, while a canal still needed water. So the railroad's really going to become the primary source of transportation in America. Again, like I said, really for the next 80 years until the car gets created. And then, of course, the car is there, and then we have airplanes and so forth. But a lot of changes in transportation, in communication during this stretch.